What's up, it's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I'll be doing my preview and predictions for World Cup Group C. It is a group filled with talent between Messi and Lewandowski. You've got two of the best players in the world who could take over a game by themselves. And Argentina themselves, they look like a very good team. A lot of people are projecting they will win the tournament, and you can easily see why with the talent that they have. Then you have Mexico and Poland, two teams that are competing to reach the knockout round. And I think it's going to be a very interesting fight between them. We know Mexico's consistency in the World Cup. Though Mexico, they don't like it themselves. They want to get past the round of 16. And Poland, with the amount of talent and star power they have in their squad, maybe they could get further as well. Then you have Saudi Arabia, who aren't going to be giving anybody an easy game. And between a team with potential to win the tournament and a very fun battle for the knockout round between Mexico and Poland and maybe even Saudi Arabia, it's going to be a very fun group to watch. Argentina come with a real chance to win the World Cup. Messi is still Messi, and the team might have an even better supporting cast than they did in 2014. Argentina have finally turned their culture around. They won a major tournament in the Copa America recently, and they are carrying great form with an unbeaten World Cup qualifying campaign. And this is a squad that just looks dangerous. They've been scoring goals, they've been keeping clean sheets, and I think they have as good a chance as any other team to win the whole thing. Argentina playing a 4-4-2, but it's a 4-4-2 in name only. It's a very fluid formation. Messi is going to be playing in one of those two that's a striker, but he's in basically a free role. He can drop into the midfield all he wants. And the midfield itself, you can also have the wide men. They tuck in a lot into the midfield, allowing the fullbacks to advance forward. And with that, the midfield becomes very packed, but that actually plays to Argentina's strength. With how technical their midfielders are, they can play in those narrow spaces, and also really tight space. It provides a good defensive cover. And with that, and just how well they can play quickly even in those tight spaces, they can break down opponents and create chances. They get some width from their fullbacks, and they will create chances for Martinez and Messi up front, and that might be the best strike force in the World Cup. Them and Benzema and Mbappe, it's one of those two, and just elite strike forces that could easily just turn a game on its head by themselves. Great players who should be able to come up with goals. Onto the individual players, and this is an Argentina squad with basically no weakness. There's a great team in there. I will say that they do lack a lot of world-class talent that you might see in a France or a Brazil, but I don't think there's any player in the squad that's a weak link. And starting at goalkeeper, just a very good position. We've got Martinez, who's been very good for Argentina and Aston Villa. I wouldn't call him a world-class keeper, but a solid, consistent player. No real weaknesses. He'll do a job. We saw him have a great penalty shootout as Argentina won Copa America, and somebody who I feel confident in goal. At center back, we have a couple of other options. Romero should be a center back for them, but his fitness is a bit of a question. I think he'll be able to go. Kind of similar to Martinez, as I was talking about. He's just a really solid player. No weaknesses. Good athlete, good on the ball. He's one of the players I think Spurs should build around. I think that he has world-class potential, but I wouldn't call him there right now. Especially with Spurs, he is playing with three at the back. That will be a bit of an adjustment, but I think he's a very good player who Argentina will rely on. And then beside him, there are two options in Martinez from Manchester United or Otamendi from Benfica. Martinez is the new signing for United. He looks very good at moments. When he's playing alongside Harry Maguire, he hasn't been the best, but as soon as the teams really got figured out, he started to look solid. He's handled himself well in the Premier League, and doesn't really have a huge standout weakness aside from his height. He's only 5'9", might be smaller. And I will say, though, Argentina did very well with Javier Mascherano in the team. I'm not overly concerned about Martinez, especially in this group in particular. I mean, Lewandowski's going to be a threat, but he'd be a threat no matter what. So I'm not too concerned about Martinez's height, but there is Otamendi there as well, who is getting older, but he still reads the game very well. Speed could be a bit more of an issue, especially against some of the more dynamic attacks that we will be seeing at this World Cup and in this group stage. And he's not a player I would have ever called, truly great. Even when he was at Manchester City when they were playing really well, I didn't think he was a standout performer for them. But he's still a solid option, and you will have to see who plays. Will Romero be fit enough? Will they go with Martinez or Otamendi if he is? So I can't say for sure who starts, but I don't think any of them are a bad option. At fullback, we have two good players in Tagliafico and Molina. I actually missed Tagliafico leaving Ajax this summer. He went to Lyon. He's a left back with a ton of energy, provides good offensive contributions as well as good defending. He's not like an amazing player. Like, he hasn't joined a Champions League power for a reason. But in the group stage especially, I don't really see him being an issue. And he's performed very well for this Argentina team. Acuna is another backup who could do a good job as well. Then you have Molina, who's probably the least proven name on this list. I think he was more noted for his attacking play, but then Diego Simeone bought him and starts him as a right back. And to impress Diego Simeone with your defensive ability, like, I think that's a great just vote of confidence for him. He isn't, like, I don't think he's a weak point in this team at all, and his attacking play really helps. Like the rest of the defense, he's not a world-class player or anything, but this defense is really just filled with good options, and while there isn't a great player, or at least not yet in Romero's case, like, it's just a solid group of players who I think play well together, who will do a good job keeping goals out for this Argentina team. The midfield is another good option, and this is a team that seems to get better the higher you go up the field, but it's just a very solid group. Though Lo Celso is injured, and I think that does hurt them, I think they'll be able to fill in. Your most defensive option in this midfield is Paredes, who's pretty solid. He can protect the back line and is good in possession. He hasn't lit the world on fire with Juventus. He hasn't started much recently, but he is still getting minutes. I think he'll be sharp enough. You do have Rodriguez as another option, but I think Paredes will be fine. Then you have Rodrigo de Paul, a very good box-to-box presence, energy to cover ground, and a very technical player as well. Again, not like a world-class option, but similar to the defense, no real weaknesses. And he's a guy who I really liked as a young player, and it's like really fun to see him like hit his potential and become like a great player. On the left side, you have two options to replace Lo Celso, either Gomez or McAllister. Gomez has a ton of energy and creativity despite his age, though I would say he's a bit more of like a forward player than a midfielder like Lo Celso was. And I think that he might be a little bit better, at least on overall quality, than McAllister. He's a bit more proven. I think McAllister will start as he's a bit more of a like-for-like swap, more of a midfielder. And, well, Gomez has a ton of great work rate. I don't think he's as solid defensively, like as a whole, as McAllister, who's just in great form for Brighton. And, like, I think he could get a great team to sign him pretty soon. Maybe Graham Potter brings him to Chelsea. They could use a bit of help in the midfield. Just a really solid player. Like, his defense has come a long way. He's already part of a great technical team, and I think he'll do even better when surrounded by better players. I'm not sure what Argentina does, but I think McAllister could step in and do a great job. Then you have Di Maria as their other winger, who just legend of the game. Like, Galactico certainly proved he's better than Freddie Adu, and still a top player that Argentina need. Like, creative, great dribbler, like the goal threat that he provides. He's just such a talented player who's, man, just been great for Argentina, great for Real Madrid, like, did very well for PSG as well, like, a great player, like, except for Manchester United, everywhere he goes. So, I'm a big fan of Di Maria, and I think if he can stay healthy, which, not that he's dealing with an injury, but just happens when he's playing with Argentina, like, they could really go far. I think he'll be a huge help for them. Then there's Martinez, deadly in front of goal, great presser, combines well. He can do all the work that you need out of a striker to allow Messi to play that free role, and I think he might already be a world-class player, and he's going to be able to show out with the chances that Argentina creates. He could easily wind up winning the Golden Boot of this tournament, especially if Messi gets a lot of passes and a lot of attention on him. So just watch out for Martinez, just having an amazing tournament. And then Messi, you know, I consider myself to have a pretty good eye for talent, and this Messi guy, he's a good player. He's a good player. I think he'll be good for Argentina. And then off the bench, you've got Dybala, very good option. Probably doesn't play the best with Messi, I have to say, which, you know, does kind of hurt his chance on this Argentina squad. And I don't think you're going to sub off Messi once this World Cup, except if you're already up like 3 or 4-0. But he's still a very talented player, and especially if they like need a goal, let's say against Saudi Arabia, who's going to be playing very defensively. If they really need a goal, put on Dybala, he'll do a great job. Then two really good young players in Alvarez, who can be a real game changer. I think there's one possibility where if like Gomez or McAllister aren't performing great, you switch to a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, and you start Alvarez because he's that good. And then Enzo Fernandez is another great talent who, by the way, it took me way too long to realize that he's not Zidane's kid, because he'd also go by Enzo Fernandez sometimes. But, man, really a talented player. And Argentina, they've got a lot of hope for the future, but I think they are going to try to win it right now. I think Argentina win this group, and I think they win it relatively easily. It's a solid team all around with a world-class strike partnership. Like, you could see, like, Lewandowski getting a goal past them. Mexico, they'll be looking for a bit of revenge, but I really don't see them tripping up. Then you get to the knockout round, and I think they'll likely face Denmark in the first round, which isn't going to be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a game they should be able to win. Then it's likely to be Netherlands in the quarterfinals, which, again, is a game they will be favored in. And I'm hoping we get a Brazil-Argentina semifinal, which would probably be the game of the tournament. I think Brazil has a little bit of an edge, but it's not by much. And honestly, any team that reaches the semifinal, I think, has a good chance of winning it. And Argentina have a great chance of winning the World Cup. It's going to be Messi's last chance, probably, and I think that he's really going to want to play for it. It's going to be really fun to watch this Argentina squad play, and I think they have just as good a chance as any to win the World Cup. Next, I'm going to be talking about Mexico, a team that has a ton of consistency at the World Cup, for better or for worse. They've reached the round of 16 and went out there for every tournament of my lifetime. But this is not really the same Mexico. You have some former stars who are aging, and young players really haven't stepped up at a great rate to replace them. Mexico's really stopped exporting talent at a high rate, and I think it's hurt them. Like, if you take a look at comparing them to Poland, like, a player like Carlos Rodriguez might have more talent than a guy like Zarowski for Poland, but he hasn't really been tested enough and played at a high enough environment to improve himself. On top of that, they are dealing with some injuries and selection problems, and this does look like one of the weaker Mexico teams we've seen in years, but we know the consistency that they have at the World Cup. Mexico like to play in a 4-3-3 and attack other teams. They do like to keep a lot of the ball as well, and that does kind of leave them open on the counter. We saw that against Canada and the United States at times in World Cup qualifying. But I think it gets the best out of their strength of the team, and that's their midfield and their attack, which is a very good part of the team with especially guys like Alvarez, Lozano. Like, there's a lot of good players in there, and it does get the best out of them. But with the amount of talent that they have, I think it does lead to them being pretty open against better teams. Individually, Mexico, they still have a good bit of talent in the team, but a lot of players who are still in Liga MX who haven't left in their entire career, which is very interesting, especially for a team that we've seen so much talent come from there before. But first we have Memo Ochoa. He's been a really good keeper. Like, I don't think I can remember Mexico playing without him, but he's fallen off in recent years. He can still do a job, but I think in this particular group, he's probably the third best goalkeeper and third best by a good bit of margin. At center back, you have two similar players in Hector Moreno and Montes. Moreno is another aging player, which is weird because I could have sworn he was like 28, but he is losing some athleticism. He's a bit slower than he used to be, but he is very good on the ball, similar to Montes. Montes is a little bit faster, but another guy who's good on the ball. Both of them can read the game pretty well, but again, they are only tested at so high of a level, and their defense has looked very exposable. I don't think they've really been taken to the challenge yet, but I struggle to see them dealing with a Lewandowski, a Martinez, a Messi very well. Fullback has been an interesting position for Mexico. At right back, they're trying to ride out one of their older players, and it hadn't worked out. So we have Jorge Sanchez, who had moved to Ajax recently, who just doesn't have the experience that he probably should with this Mexico team and the familiarity. And on top of that, he hasn't been in the best form at Ajax. The defense, it really isn't looking too great. He's a great athlete, and he does have a good bit of talent, but he's not coming in the best form, and he's going to have some tough tasks for him. Then you have Gallardo, who's a pretty good attacking left back, but I don't really rate him too much as a defender, and again, it's going to be like a bit of a struggle, because he might be going up against a Di Maria, some good players from Poland, and it's a defense that it might struggle this World Cup. But then you move into the midfield, and it's the strength of this team. Edson Alvarez is a really good defensive midfielder who's been their success story at Ajax. He covers ground, great in possession. He'll have his hands full with guys like Messi, with all the creative players in Argentina and Poland. But I think he might be up for the task. He's looking very good recently, and I think that he's a very good midfielder. And the midfield is good throughout this team. Like I said before, I think they will be able to dominate possession against a squad like Poland. You'll either have Hector Herrera or Cuadrado in the midfield. I think it's one or the other. They'll have one more player besides them. Both good box-to-box talents, but both aging. Weirdly enough, despite Cuadrado being the older player by a couple of years, I think he's aging a bit better than Hector Herrera. Though Hector Herrera is probably the more talented overall player. You've seen him have some really good games in the Champions League, Europa League. So who you go with there, I feel like it doesn't particularly matter, but both of them are going to be pretty good. Then you have Gutierrez, who's been talented for PSV. Another good box-to-box player who's put in some top performances for PSV this season. I think their midfield, it's a very good group. They probably won't be able to hang with Argentina, but I think they'll be able to get the better of Poland. It's a very strong midfield. Mexico's attack has a lot of talent, but injury really took their toll on this squad. And aside from Lozano, it's not looking too great. But Lozano is a very good player. He's starring for Napoli at the moment, a really good Napoli team. And the problem is that I think he'll have to come up with a lot of goals for Mexico, and that's not really a strength of his game. He'll need to step up, but with how good he is, how dynamic of a player is, he might be able to do it. Then with Corona injured, on the other side, it's probably going to be Alexis Vega, who is a good player, but again, only played in Mexico, and again, not really too big of a goal threat. And up front, it's Raul Jimenez is one of the options. We saw how good of a player he could be, but he's dealing with an injury right now, and honestly, since his head injury, he hasn't looked like a Premier League level player. And with the injury that he already has, I'm not sure if he even starts. If he does, it's not going to be great. You have a Funes Mori or Martin who could also come in. I don't know who would play of those two, but I really don't think it matters, and not in a positive way like Herrera or Gutierrez or Cuadrado. You also have, they left out two of their better young players in Jimenez and Lainez, and I feel like that could hurt them as well. Mexico do have some talent, but they're coming in some bad form, and despite their experience at the World Cup, I feel like part of that is almost holding back the team, players being shown loyalty that maybe they shouldn't have, and there are some selection issues altogether. Maybe a Carlos Vela or a Chicharito could come in and really raise this team's level, but it's not looking too great for them, and I actually think they have a slightly worse chance to Poland to advance, but it's not by too much. I think they have a similar weak defense with a good attack. Mexico is more talented in the midfield. It's kind of similar to when I was talking about Serbia and Switzerland, where I think Serbia is the more talented overall team, but I think Switzerland has a bit of a better matchup than them. So I feel like Mexico, they have a bit of a worse chance to advance than Poland, but they're still a good team. I think should they reach the knockout round, it would be France, and I think the curse continues, but I think they'd be lucky to reach the knockout round. Then we have Poland, a team with several good players, but they have struggled recently at major tournaments. They have a ton of experience in the Champions League and some really good players. And I will say with this team, every player, if you talk about them in their prime, I think they're a really good option. Now, some of them are still very young, some of them are still very old, but I think the overall talent level of this Polish side is great. I mean, you have Lewandowski, who's just world-class striker, constant goal threat. Szczesny's a solid stopper. There's a lot of creativity in the squad. The defense leaves something to be desired, and if Lewandowski slows down, they could be in trouble, but I think Poland have a solid team. They play a 3-4-3 that covers for a weak defense and tries to get the most out of the attack. Poland will likely bunker in against top teams and probably against Mexico as well and try to score on the counter. This can work, but is pretty pragmatic and leaves their defense open. I think Szczesny and Lewandowski will have to play at their best if they want to have a chance. And speaking of, we can go into individual players, and we've got Szczesny, who's a very good shot stopper, though his form has tailed off a bit this season. Juventus Perrin has probably been the better keeper this year, though he's a very good player. At least as good as Martinez, the other former Arsenal man. And I feel like just a solid keeper who, I feel like he might be able to keep them in games that they shouldn't be winning. He'll have to be at his best to do that, but it's something that he can do. Now onto the center backs, and this is what I was talking about when I meant every player on this team has the talent to be a very good player. It's just they're not really at that level right now. Bednarik is somebody who we've seen be a very solid Premier League center back with Southampton, though he moved to Aston Villa and he really hasn't played this year, despite Aston Villa having some troubles at center back. We know he can do a good job in the Premier League, but with him not playing that much, it's not looking that positive. Then we have Gillick, who is having a mixed season in Serie B. Like, we saw how good he could be with Monaco, but, like, he's a bit over the hill, probably shouldn't be playing ideally, but he still reads the game well, and he'll be covered by two center backs beside him who are pretty good players, but it's not a strong point. Then you have Kirawar, who on form is probably Poland's top defender. He's a young guy who I feel like will be a very good player in the future. He's not exactly like too fast or elite on the ball, but I think he's fine. He has a good future, and I do like him as a player, but like at the moment, Poland's defense is a bit of a problem. Fullbacks where things get better, though. You have Matty Cash, who's just a solid Premier League player. He's actually playing at Aston Villa, unlike Bednarik. And I think with him being allowed to get forward a lot more, we'll really be able to see a lot of his game. I think he's a very talented player who can really help this team win. He'll have to play very well against Lozano, but I think that's a challenge he'll be up to. I don't think he's a better player than Lozano, but he might be able to step up, and with the help of a three at the back behind him, he might be able to do a job. And his offensive contributions might keep Lozano back a little bit as well. Then left you have Zalewski, who's a top prospect for Poland. Good athlete, good defensive work rate. And to be a starter for Mourinho as a young player, like I was talking about with Molina and Simeone, like that's a good sign. That's a good stamp of approval. And he's a guy who I love his potential. I think he'd be a top player for Poland in the future. Like, when I say top, I mean like Champions League, really good team level. Though, with his age, there'll be a bit of an issue. I think he'll be okay against Mexico and Saudi Arabia, but should they go a lot further, then there might be a bit of an issue. Going to the midfield, we have Krychowiak, who's experienced as a player, and maybe you could see playing against Saudi Arabian opposition as a positive in this group, but yeah, he's not playing at a great level right now, and he is getting older. He's still solid defensively and can keep possession. And with a more athletic Zarkowski beside him, I think he could be fine. But again, I think Mexico has a stronger midfield. And on to Zarkowski himself. He's not really been playing for Fiorentina lately, which is not a good sign, like Bednarik. He's still a solid worker in midfield who will help cover, though I have to think, like, I probably would have had Klitsch come into the team. I think he's healthy. And if not, then probably a Bilek at Birmingham isn't the other option. Who, like, he's a guy who I like, but I'm not going to say he wouldn't be a great starter at the World Cup. Midfield is definitely looking like a bit of a weak point for this team. Attack is where Poland really hits its stride. You have Zielinski, who's Poland's second best player, great creative talent, who's really helped Napoli, similar to Lozano. He's a top player that Poland needs to do well, and in addition, I think in this formation, he'll be playing in the attack. He'll have a lot less defensive responsibilities, and I think that'll really let him loose offensively, and he could play even better for this Polish side. Then you have Szymanski, who is coming into the tournament in great form for Feyenoord. He's been scoring a lot, and just a good option on his left foot. I think he'll really trouble maybe a Sanchez for that Mexico team, and he's one of Poland's more dynamic players, so I think he'd be a big threat. And then up front, you have Lewandowski, who's like a year removed from being the world's best player. Like, if he gets chances, he will score. He had a great Euro for Poland, despite them not advancing out of the group. And he's somebody who's going to have to be at his best if Poland want to have a chance, and I think he will be. Overall, this is a Polish team with some good young players, some good veterans, and some great players in their prime. It's not a ton of talent, but it might just be enough to get out of this group. I think with their style of play, with them bunkering in and playing defensively, I think that gives them a better chance against Mexico, especially with Mexico really struggling to have a big goal threat and them having a better keeper and a better striker. I think that might take them over the top. And on top of that, they do have a lot of good experienced players in that team. I think they might just be able to advance over Mexico. It's going to be very close. I think it's pretty close to 50. It's a toss-up basically between them. I think Poland have a slight edge, but I wouldn't be surprised if either of them advance. Should they get to the knockout round, again, it's going to be France in the round of 16, and you can hope, you can bunker in and hope for the best. With Lewandowski up front, you always have a chance to score, and if you can keep the game 0-0, like, anything's possible, but it's very unlikely. And I think this team has a bit of a ceiling on their talent, and they won't get too far, but I think they might just be able to get out of this group. Last and least, we have Saudi Arabia, the weakest team in this group, and honestly one of the weakest teams at this tournament. There's no one playing outside of the Saudi League, and there really aren't any great talents as well. They'll try to sit in and hope to steal a win, probably try to steal a point, if we're being honest. I mean, anything's possible at this World Cup. Like, I'm not going to say any team has no shot at advancing, but it's very unlikely. You have Al Sharani, who's a fullback who I really like. He's a fast player. I think he could do a job. He might have aged a bit since the last tournament. And Al Dasari is a pretty good winger, but I don't think it's enough. Like, especially when you look at like Mexico's track record at this tournament, Argentina's talent, Poland having world-class players. Like, I think they did a good job to get to this tournament, but I don't think they have a shot to advance. Overall, we've got a great team in Argentina, followed by two sides who will have a really good battle in Poland and Mexico, and then Saudi Arabia might just be able to trip a team up. It's going to be really fun to watch these guys play. I think Poland will just edge out Mexico for that second place spot, and then Argentina should be able to advance with relative ease. I think in the knockout round, Poland or Mexico will probably lose to France, but Argentina, I think they have a chance to really go far, and honestly, they have a shot to win this tournament. No team has an above 50% chance of winning this tournament, but Argentina is as close as you can get to a favorite. Them and Brazil, I think, are the two top teams, and it's going to be really fun to watch Messi have a great showing. You have Lewandowski, Lozano, even those guys I mentioned for Saudi Arabia. It's going to be really fun to watch just the combination of great players play, and it's a really fun group that I'm looking forward to watching. And yeah, that's all we have to talk about. It's going to be a really fun tournament, and yeah, see you.